Some betrayals are quiet whispers in the dark, but others arrive with the low electric hum of a six-figure supercar. For Tiffany Dubois, the gleaming rose-gold Porsche Taycan was a trophy, a declaration of victory in a war she thought she had already won. She pictured the older, dowdy wife, Catherine Vance, withering in her sterile office at the sight of this magnificent machine, a gift from a man Tiffany had successfully stolen. What she failed to understand, as she pulled into the visitors' parking space of the imposing Sterling Tower, was that she wasn't just driving her lover's grandest gesture. She was driving the very weapon that would bring her entire gilded world crashing down around her, because the name on the title was one she knew all too well, but for all the wrong reasons. The marriage of Catherine and Richard Vance had long ceased to be a union of passion and had instead become a meticulously curated performance. To the outside world, they were the golden couple of Chicago's elite. He, the handsome, silver-tongued financial manager at a prestigious firm, she, the quiet architectural genius and majority partner of Vance and Sterling Designs, the firm that bore her name and was built on her talent. They lived in a sprawling Lincoln Park brownstone, attended the right charity galas, and smiled for the society pages. But behind the closed doors of their limestone facade, the silence was a tangible thing, heavy and cold. Catherine had poured her life into her work. While Richard was out charming potential clients over steak dinners and expensive wine, she was in the studio, her fingers smudged with graphite, her mind weaving blueprints into breathtaking realities. She designed skyscrapers that redefined skylines and homes that were sanctuaries of light and space. Her firm was her baby, her legacy and her escape. It was a world of clean lines, logical structures and measurable success, everything her marriage was not. For the past year, a chill had seeped into the cracks of their relationship, a frost that no amount of feigned affection could thaw. Richard had become distant, his phone guarded with the ferocity of a dragon hoarding treasure. There were late client meetings that stretched into the early morning hours and weekend golf trips, from which he returned with no new tan, but a distinct scent of unfamiliar perfume clinging to his clothes. Catherine wasn't naive. She was observant. She was an architect, after all. She saw the structural weaknesses, the faulty foundations, the hairline fractures that threatened to bring the whole edifice down. But she was also a strategist. A wrecking ball was messy. She preferred a controlled demolition. Her 40th birthday was approaching a milestone that felt less like a celebration and more like a demarcation line between the life she had lived and the one she was about to claim. Richard, in a rare moment of performative attentiveness, had asked her what she wanted. A trip maybe to Tuscany, he'd suggested, barely looking up from his tablet. I was thinking of something. More permanent, Catherine had replied, her voice even. Something for me. The idea had been growing in her mind for months. It started as a whisper of defiance and grew into a roar of self-worth. She had just landed the coveted commission for the new Lakeside Art Museum, a project that would secure her firm's reputation for a generation. The initial signing bonus alone was astronomical. It was her victory, her success, her money, and she was going to buy herself something that Richard could never touch, something that symbolized her own power and freedom. 2 weeks before her birthday, she walked into a Porsche dealership alone. She wasn't dressed in the power suits she wore for board meetings, but in simple, elegant trousers and a cashmere sweater. The younger salesman initially overlooked her, flocking to men in flashy watches, but an older gentleman named Arthur saw the quiet confidence in her eyes. "Can I help you, madam?" he asked. "I'm interested in the Taycan Turbo S," Catherine said, her voice firm, leaving no room for doubt. She knew exactly what she wanted. She had researched it for weeks. The pinnacle of electric performance, a silent predator. She didn't want it in a brash red or a boring black. She pointed to a color swatch that shimmered under the showroom lights. Frozen berry metallic, a complex, sophisticated shade that shifted from pale pink to muted lavender depending on the light. It was unique feminine and utterly unapologetic. She paid for it outright from her personal account, the one Richard didn't have access to, the one she had set up when the first hairline fractures in their marriage had appeared. The paperwork was all in her name, Catherine L. Vance. The car was a secret, a promise she made to herself. It was delivered to a private climate-controlled garage she rented downtown, a space known only to her and her fiercely loyal assistant, Penelope. It was her escape pod waiting for launch. Her actual birthday arrived with a predictable lack of fanfare. Richard presented her with a pair of diamond earrings that were beautiful, expensive, and utterly impersonal. They felt like a severance payment. He'd made a reservation at Aurelia, a restaurant so trendy it was almost a cliché. During dinner, he was more animated than he had been in months, but his energy wasn't directed at her. He was on his phone constantly, a sly, self-satisfied smile playing on his lips as he tapped out messages. "Big deal closing?" Catherine asked, swirling the wine in her glass. Something like that. He'd smirked, his eyes gleaming with a secret she knew had nothing to do with finance. "A very big, very lucrative deal. You'll see. I'm about to make a major acquisition." Catherine simply nodded, a serene smile on her face. She let him have his little secrets. Her own secret was parked 3 blocks away, a silent rose-gold testament to the fact that, while he was busy playing games, she had already bought the entire stadium. As they left the restaurant, a valet pulled up in a familiar black sedan. Richard, feeling expansive, tipped the young man a $100 bill. He turned to Catherine, draping an arm around her shoulders. "See, Kate, some things are just worth the price," he said, his voice slick with self-congratulation. "You just have to know how to close the deal." Catherine looked at him, truly looked at him, and for the first time in a long time felt nothing but a cool, calculating pity. "You have no idea," she said softly, her words lost in the city noise. He was so busy trying to build a new life on her foundation, he hadn't realized she was about to excavate the entire property. Tiffany Dubois lived her life through an Instagram filter. Her world was a curated collection of brunch spreads, designer handbags, and sun-drenched selfies in exotic locations, all paid for by men who saw her as another luxury acquisition. At 26, she had honed her skills to a fine art. She wasn't just a pretty face. She was a student of desire, an expert at mirroring a man's ego back at him until he was so captivated by his own reflection that he would give her anything she wanted. Richard Vance was her masterpiece. She'd met him at a rooftop bar where she'd been celebrating a friend's birthday. He was older, distinguished with that easy confidence that came from generational wealth, or so she thought. He'd bought her a glass of champagne, and his compliments were as smooth and expensive as the vintage. He spoke of his stifling marriage to a career-obsessed woman who didn't appreciate him. Tiffany listened with wide, sympathetic eyes, her hand resting gently on his forearm, making him feel seen, desired, and powerful. Within a month, he had set her up in a sleek condo in River North with stunning city views. Her closet began to fill with Cartier bracelets and Chanel bags. Richard wasn't just a benefactor. He was a project. She was going to be the woman who finally got him to leave his cold, boring wife. She was going to be the next Mrs. Vance. Her obsession with Catherine was all-consuming. She spent hours scrolling through old articles about Vance and sterling designs, scrutinizing photos of Catherine at charity events. She saw a woman who was plain severe, always in dark architectural clothing. A woman who looked more comfortable with a blueprint than a Birkin bag. The jealousy she felt was sharp and acidic, not because she wanted Catherine's life, but because Catherine had the one thing she couldn't yet claim the name, the legitimacy, the ring. Tiffany believed the war was won on the battlefield of material possessions. Every gift from Richard was a point scored. Every secret weekend trip was a territory claimed. She documented it all on her private social media, a digital diary of her conquest for her inner circle to admire. He says he's just waiting for the right time she'd tell her friends over spicy margaritas. His finances are complicated, tied up with her company, but he's untangling it. He told me he's about to close a massive deal that will set him up for life for us. The massive deal was a fiction Richard had concocted to keep Tiffany placated and to bolster his own flagging ego. In reality, he was a glorified wealth manager who, despite his expensive suits, was living far beyond his means. His lifestyle and Tiffany's was being funded by a complex and deeply illegal system of embezzlement he had orchestrated from within Catherine's own company accounts. He had created phantom vendors, inflated invoices, and rerouted funds through a series of shell corporations. He saw it not as theft, but as his due. He was the one who networked, who brought in the clients with his charm. Catherine just drew the pictures. In his mind, he was taking his rightful share. The Porsche was going to be his grandest gesture yet. After Catherine's birthday dinner, he'd gone to the private garage where she kept her modest sedan. He was planning to borrow it for the weekend, but then he saw it, tucked away under a silk cover in the adjacent bay, a bay he knew Catherine also rented, was the unmistakable silhouette of a sports car. His curiosity piqued, he lifted the cover. He stared, dumbfounded, at the frozen berry metallic Porsche Taycan. It was breathtaking. He had no idea where it came from. A new client of Catherine's, a company car he hadn't been told about. His mind raced, but it never once landed on the most obvious conclusion that Catherine had bought it for herself. Catherine didn't do things like this. She was practical, sensible. She drove a reliable, safe car. This kind of flamboyant purchase was not in her nature. A slow, wicked grin spread across his face. The car was registered to the garage address, and he had access. He could see the paperwork tucked in the glove compartment. The owner was listed as K.L. Vance. Perfect. He would spin it as a surprise he'd bought for her a car for the Vance family. But he would give the keys to Tiffany first. It was a brilliant, two-pronged move. He would thrill his mistress and simultaneously assert his control over his wife's assets. He was the man of the house, after all. What was hers was his to dispense, as he saw fit. He called Tiffany the next morning, his voice thick with excitement. "Sweetheart, do you remember that little surprise I told you I was working on the big acquisition?" "Don't tell me you bought me another bracelet, Ricky," she purred. "Much, much bigger." He chuckled. "How do you feel about German engineering, top of the line? 0 to 60 in 2.6 seconds. Tiffany went silent for a moment, the implication dawning on her. "No, you didn't." "I did," he said, basking in her anticipated adoration. "It's for you, a pre-engagement present. I want the world to see how I feel about you. I want her to see." That was all Tiffany needed to hear. I want her to see. This wasn't just a car. It was a crown. It was validation, and she knew exactly what she was going to do with it. Her mind immediately began to script the confrontation. She wouldn't just send a picture. She would deliver the message in person. She would drive this symbol of Richard's devotion directly to the heart of Catherine's kingdom, her office, and she would watch the Ice Queen melt. "When do I get it?" She breathed into the phone, her heart pounding. "Tomorrow," Richard promised. "Be ready. Wear something spectacular." That night, Tiffany couldn't sleep. She laid out her outfit, a tight white designer dress, sky-high heels and sunglasses, that were offensively large. She practiced her speech in the mirror, a cocktail of pity and condescension. She was no longer the other woman. She was the woman. And tomorrow Catherine Vance would know it, beyond a shadow of a doubt. The following afternoon, Richard met Tiffany at a discreet location, a few blocks from the private garage. He pulled up in the Porsche, the electric motor making only a whisper. The frozen berry color seemed to glow in the afternoon sun, a beacon of audacious luxury. When Tiffany saw it, a genuine, unscripted gasp escaped her lips. It was more magnificent than she could have imagined. It looked like something forged from crystallized champagne and ambition. "Oh, Ricky," she breathed, running a perfectly manicured hand over the hood. It's perfect." Richard beamed his chest, puffing out. This was the adoration he craved, the validation he never got from Catherine. Catherine would have asked about the insurance premiums or the charging infrastructure. Tiffany just saw the statement it made. "It's the best for the best," he said, handing her a key fob. "There's only one of these keys. It's all yours." He had, of course, pocketed the spare that was with the car's documentation. A small detail. He launched into the lie he had so carefully constructed. "I bought it for us, really. It's in the family name for tax purposes, you know how it is. But I want you to be the one to drive it, to break it in." Tiffany wasn't listening to the details. She was already framing the perfect Instagram story. The key fob in her hand, the Porsche logo prominent. The caption was already writing itself in her head. Some girls get flowers, others get the whole damn dealership. Blessed upgrade. She slid into the driver's seat, the scent of new leather and expensive electronics enveloping her. The cockpit felt like a spaceship. "I can't believe this is mine," she whispered, her voice filled with reverence. "It is Richard," said, leaning in to kiss her. "Now I have to run to a meeting. Some investors I need to glad hand. You go enjoy yourself. Show it off. You've earned it." He gave her a conspiratorial wink. "Maybe drive by some places where it'll be appreciated." He didn't need to be more specific. They both knew exactly what he meant. As he walked away to catch a cab, Tiffany watched him go, a triumphant smirk on her face. He was so predictable, and she was going to give him exactly what he wanted. Her first stop was not a drive along the lakefront or a tour through the Gold Coast. Her destination was singular, a bullseye she had been aiming at for months. She programmed the address for the Sterling Tower into the car's state-of-the-art navigation system. The silky smooth voice of the GPS felt like a co-conspirator guiding her toward her final victory. Driving the Taycan was an experience in itself. The silent, instantaneous acceleration was intoxicating. At every red light, she felt the eyes of other drivers and pedestrians on her. They were looking at the car, but she felt as though they were looking at her, anointing her as someone special, someone who had arrived. She played her music loud, a playlist of unapologetic female empowerment anthems that felt hilariously ironic in context. As she pulled onto LaSalle Street, the heart of Chicago's financial district, the towering glass and steel canyons seemed to part for her. The Sterling Tower was one of the newer, more prestigious buildings, a sleek, modernist masterpiece that Catherine's own firm had ironically helped design the interior for. The irony was lost on Tiffany. She just saw it as the enemy's fortress. She bypassed the underground public parking, pulling directly into the short-term visitor loop right in front of the main entrance. It was a flagrant violation of the building's parking rules, meant for quick drop-offs only. But that was the point. She wasn't planning on being long. She wanted the car to be seen. She left it angled, just so the unconventional color making it impossible to ignore. Taking a deep breath, she checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her lipstick was perfect. Her expression was a carefully crafted mask of serene confidence and pity. She grabbed her purse, making sure the Porsche key fob was dangling conspicuously from her fingers. The lobby was a cavern of marble and glass, filled with people in expensive suits moving with purpose. A stoic security guard at a large granite desk eyed her approach. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, his tone flat. "I'm here to see Catherine Vance Tiffany," said her voice, sweet as honey laced with arsenic. "I don't have an appointment, but I'm quite sure she'll want to see me. It's a personal matter." The guard made a call. After a moment, he looked back at her. "Mrs. Vance's assistant says she is in a meeting. You can wait, or you can leave a message." Tiffany smiled. "Oh, I'll wait." "Tell her assistant, a delivery has been made. A very special delivery from her husband. She'll understand." She took a seat on a low leather couch, crossing her legs and making a show of scrolling through her phone, the key fob still on display. She felt a thrill course through her veins. This was it. The final scene of the movie, where the plucky heroine wins the man and the castle. She had the keys to the kingdom, and she was about to march right up to the throne room and announce the queen was dead. She had no idea she was the jester about to perform the most humiliating act of her life in the queen's own court. Penelope Penny Hayes was more than Catherine Vance's executive assistant. She was her gatekeeper, her confidant, and her early warning system. A sharp, impeccably organized woman in her late 30s, Penny had been with Catherine since the early days of the firm, and possessed a loyalty as unshakable as the foundations of the buildings they designed. She was the first person to notice Richard's expense account anomalies, and the first person Catherine confided in when the whispers of infidelity became a roar of certainty. When the call came from lobby security, Penny's finely tuned senses went on high alert. "A Miss Dubois is here to see Mrs. Vance. Says it's a personal matter regarding her husband." Penny's back straightened. Dubois. The name from the private investigator's report. The name on the credit card statements for lingerie and weekend getaways. "She's in a client meeting that cannot be disturbed," Penny said, her voice pure ice. "The lady said to tell you a special delivery has been made from Mr. Vance." Penny's eyes narrowed. This was an escalation, a bold, reckless one. "Thank you, Frank. I'll handle it." She walked the short distance to Catherine's office, a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a panoramic view of the city and Lake Michigan. Catherine was not in a client meeting. She was standing over a large blueprint, her focus absolute. "Trouble?" Catherine asked, without looking up, sensing Penny's presence. "The blonde from the file is in the lobby," Penny said bluntly. "She's trying to force her way up." Catherine placed her pencil down with deliberate calm. She looked at Penny, and for a fleeting moment, a flicker of weariness crossed her face. But it was replaced almost instantly by a steely resolve. She had been preparing for this in one way or another for months. She had hoped to control the timeline, to execute her plan with surgical precision. But if the enemy was bringing the battle to her gates, she would not hide behind the walls. She mentioned a special delivery from Richard, Penny added. Catherine's gaze drifted to the window down to the street below. And then she saw it, parked brazenly in the fire lane, glowing like a toxic blossom. The frozen berry Porsche. Her Porsche. A slow, cold understanding washed over her. It was audacious. It was idiotic. And it was the final, irrefutable piece of evidence she needed. Richard hadn't just been cheating and stealing. He was monumentally, catastrophically stupid. "Let her come up." Penny Catherine said, her voice quiet, but resonant with newfound power. "Are you sure?" "Oh, yes," Catherine said, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "Please show Miss Dubois in, and ask Robert from accounting to join us in 5 minutes. Bring the portfolio from the bottom right drawer of my desk. The blue one. Penny, recognizing the tone of a general about to spring a perfectly laid trap, nodded sharply. Right away. Tiffany was growing impatient in the lobby when Penny appeared. Miss Dubois, Mrs. Vance will see you now. Tiffany stood, a triumphant gleam in her eye. It worked. She followed Penny into the elevator, the silence thick with unspoken animosity. They rode to the 48th floor, the penthouse level occupied solely by Vance and Sterling designs. The doors opened into a reception area of minimalist elegance, slate floors, brushed steel accents, and walls adorned with framed awards and stunning architectural photography. Penny led her through the open-plan studio, where dozens of architects and designers worked in focused silence, heads lifted as they passed the sight of Tiffany, all tight white dress and brash confidence, a stark contrast to the firm's understated aesthetic. Tiffany drank in the attention, imagining them to be Catherine's loyal subjects, witnessing the arrival of the new queen. They reached the double-glass doors of Catherine's office. Penny opened one and announced, "Miss Dubois is here, Catherine." Catherine was standing by the window, her back to the door looking out at her city. She was dressed in a simple, dark navy sheath dress, her hair pulled back in a neat chignon. She looked powerful, serene, and completely in her element. "Thank you, Penny. You can close the door." Tiffany strutted in her heels, clicking on the polished concrete floor. She let the silence hang for a moment before she began her rehearsed speech. "Catherine," she started, her tone dripping with false sympathy. "I know this must be difficult. I really didn't want it to have to be this way." Catherine turned around slowly. Her face was a mask of polite neutrality. "Miss Dubois, I'm afraid you have me at a disadvantage. To what do I owe this unexpected visit?" The feigned ignorance was exactly what Tiffany expected. "Oh, please, let's not play games. I'm here about Richard." "Ricky. He feels terrible about hurting you, of course. But we can't help who we fall in love with." She walked over to the client chairs opposite Catherine's large desk, and instead of sitting perched on the edge of it, a deliberate act of territorial marking, she dangled the key fob from her finger. "He wanted me to have this," Tiffany said, her voice rising with excitement as she went in for the kill. "He said he wanted me to have something beautiful, something to show how much he values me." "He's leaving you, Catherine. He's just been waiting for the right moment to tell you." She paused, waiting for the tears of the outburst, the crumble. She got nothing. Catherine simply watched her, with an unnerving stillness. "He bought me a car," Tiffany pressed on her voice, becoming a little shrill. "A Porsche. It's downstairs, a Taycan Turbo S. He said it was time for an upgrade in every sense of the word. I guess he's finally realized he deserves a woman who is as fast and exciting as his own life, not some boring architect who is married to her job." She stood up and walked towards the window, gesturing grandly. "It's that one. The pretty rose gold one. He said the color reminded him of my skin. He's so romantic." This was her moment of triumph. She had laid her winning card on the table. She had flaunted the ultimate symbol of her victory right in the wife's face, in her own seat of power. She turned back from the window, a victorious smirk plastered on her face, ready to witness the complete and utter devastation of the woman who stood before her. Catherine Vance let the silence stretch, allowing Tiffany's triumphant words to hang in the air like cheap perfume. She observed the younger woman, the smug expression, the defiant posture, the way she brandished the key fob like a scepter. It was all so theatrical, so deeply pathetic. For a moment, Catherine almost felt a pang of pity for her. This woman was a pawn in a game she didn't even know she was playing, a game orchestrated by a fool and about to be ended by a queen. Finally, Catherine spoke, her voice devoid of heat or hysteria. It was calm, precise, and as cold as the glass of the window she stood beside. A Porsche Taycan Turbo S, she repeated, as if tasting the words. In frozen berry metallic. Yes, it's a stunning car. The performance is unparalleled. The regenerative braking system is a marvel of engineering. Tiffany's smirk faltered slightly. This was not the reaction she had anticipated. She was expecting tears rage a screaming match, not a technical review. Yeah, it's really fast. It is, Catherine agreed, taking a small step forward. 0 to 60 in 2.6 seconds. 750 horsepower with overboost. A top track speed of 161 miles per hour. Did Richard tell you that he mentioned it was powerful? Tiffany stammered, feeling a strange sense of unease creeping in. Catherine was controlling the narrative, steering the conversation in a direction she didn't understand. He wouldn't know, Catherine said, her voice dropping a fraction. He's never driven it. In fact, until yesterday he didn't even know it existed. A confused frown creased Tiffany's brow. What are you talking about? He bought it for me. It was a surprise, for our future. Catherine allowed herself a small, mirthless smile. Miss Dubois Richard has many flaws. He's a liar, a narcissist, and as I've recently discovered, a thief. But one thing he is not is original. He doesn't have the imagination to pick out a car like that, let alone in that specific color. He would have bought you a red Mercedes because he's a cliché. She took another step closer. Her eyes locked on Tiffany's. You see, Richard didn't buy you that car. He couldn't afford to. The commission he earns in a year wouldn't cover the down payment. That's not true, Tiffany insisted, her voice wavering. He's a brilliant financial manager. He just closed a huge deal. At that moment, there was a soft knock on the door. Penny entered, followed by a nervous-looking man in a rumpled suit carrying a blue portfolio. You asked for me, Mrs. Vance, the man Robert from accounting asked. Yes, Robert. Thank you for coming, Catherine said, not taking her eyes off Tiffany. Miss Dubois here was just telling me about the very expensive gift Richard gave her. She finally turned her gaze to the key fob in Tiffany's hand. May I see that? It was a command, not a request. Hesitantly, Tiffany held it out. Catherine didn't take it. Instead, she reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out an identical key fob. She pressed the lock button. From 48 floors below, the Porsche emitted an audible chirp, its lights flashing once. A wave of confusion washed over Tiffany's face. Catherine then pressed the unlock button. The car chirped twice. I believe this is where the confusion lies, Catherine said, her voice lethally soft. Richard didn't give you a key. He gave you my spare. You see, Miss Dubois, I bought that car 3 weeks ago as a birthday present to myself, with a small portion of the signing bonus from the new Lakeside Museum project, a project worth 9 figures. It was purchased from my personal trust, paid in full. The title, the registration, the insurance, it's all in my name. She gestured to the accountant. Robert, if you would. Robert, flustered, opened the blue portfolio. On top was a crisp, clear copy of the vehicle's certificate of title. He held it up. The name listed under owner was clear even from a distance, Catherine L. Vance. Below it were copies of the bank, transfer, and the bill of sale. Tiffany stared at the documents, her face draining of all color. The blood drained from her head, leaving a dizzying, roaring sound in her ears. The white designer dress suddenly felt cheap and suffocating. The entire scene replayed in her mind, Richard's smug pronouncements, his lies about tax purposes, and the family name. It all clicked into place with sickening clarity. "No," she whispered, shaking her head in disbelief. "No, he wouldn't." "Oh, he would," Catherine said flatly. "Because he's a parasite who believes that what is mine is his to give away. He saw my car, a symbol of my success, and he tried to use it as a tool to impress you and humiliate me. It was a pathetic, desperate move. And it was his last." She took the key fob from Tiffany's now limp fingers. "I believe this belongs to me." The humiliation was a physical force, pressing down on Tiffany, stealing the air from her lungs. The eyes of the accountant, the silent judgment of Penny by the door. It was all too much. The grand triumph had curdled into a nightmare of public disgrace. Penny Catherine said, her voice now crisp and businesslike. "Please have security escort Miss Dubois from the premises. She seems to have left her ride in the fire lane. I'm sure they can have it towed from there if she doesn't move it immediately. But since she doesn't have a key, that might be difficult." The finality of the statement was brutal. Tiffany stood frozen, utterly defeated. The woman she had dismissed as a boring, dowdy wife had just dismantled her entire reality with the precision of a surgeon and the ruthlessness of a predator. As Penny gently but firmly took her by the arm to lead her out, Tiffany looked back at Catherine, who had already turned her attention to the documents Robert was holding. She hadn't been a rival. She hadn't even been a threat. She had been a minor, messy inconvenience, and she had just been cleaned up. The walk of shame back through the office, past the curious, staring faces, was the longest journey of her life. The hours after Tiffany's humiliating exit passed in a blur of controlled activity for Catherine. She held a brief, calm meeting with her senior partners, reassuring them that a personal matter was being handled and that it would have no bearing on the firm's operations. She reviewed the museum blueprints, making a few sharp, insightful annotations. To any observer, she was the epitome of professional composure. But beneath the surface, a cold fury was simmering, waiting for the right moment to be unleashed. She left the office at 6 o'clock, sharp. She didn't take her usual car service. Instead, she took the elevator down to her private garage. She walked over to her Porsche, and slid into the driver's seat. The scent of new leather was now tainted with the faint, cloying smell of Tiffany's perfume. Catherine grimaced and lowered all the windows, letting the cool evening air purge the unwelcome scent. She drove home, not with speed, but with a deliberate, almost processional slowness. Each red light was a moment to breathe, to center herself, to sharpen the edges of her anger into a fine, dangerous point. When she pulled into the garage of their Lincoln Park home, Richard's car was already there. He was home early. Good. She entered the house through the mudroom. He was in the kitchen pouring himself a generous glass of scotch. He was humming a sure sign of his self-satisfaction. He thought his little gambit had worked. He thought he had successfully played both women and emerged the victor. "There you are," he said, smiling brightly at her. He didn't notice the storm clouds in her eyes. "Long day?" "You look tired." "It was eventful," Catherine said, setting her briefcase down on the marble island that she had designed. "Anything interesting happen?" he asked, taking a sip of his drink, the picture of casual innocence. "A woman named Tiffany Dubois paid a visit to my office today." Catherine stated, her voice flat. Richard choked on his scotch. He coughed, his face turning red, his eyes wide with panic. He quickly composed himself, attempting a look of confusion. "Tiffany, I think she's the daughter of a client, a bit of a troubled girl. Why would she come to see you?" The lie was so bald, so insulting in its lack of effort, that it was almost laughable. "She came to inform me that you were leaving me." Catherine continued ignoring his feeble attempt at deflection. "And to show me the very extravagant gift you'd bought her. A Porsche Richard. A rose gold Porsche." Richard's composure began to crack. "Now, Kate, there's been a misunderstanding. That car, I bought that for us. For you, for your birthday, I was going to surprise you with it this weekend. That silly girl must have gotten confused. I let her take it for a spin, that's all. As a favor to her father." "Stop, Catherine," said her voice, dangerously low. The single word cut through his blustering defense like a shard of glass. "Just stop talking. Every lie you tell is an insult to the 20 years of my life I have wasted on you." She opened her briefcase and took out a thick, leather-bound folder. Not the blue one from the office. This one was black. She slid it across the island towards him. "The car is the least of your problems." He looked at the folder, then at her, his bravado finally dissolving into a tangible fear. "What is this?" "That is the result of a 6-month investigation by a forensic accounting firm," Catherine said. "It seems there have been some financial irregularities at Vance and Sterling. Phantom vendors, inflated construction material invoices, a series of payments routed through offshore shell corporations in the Caymans. A total of $4.7 million has been embezzled from my company over the past 2 years. Richard's face went white. He looked as if she had physically struck him. He sank onto a nearby stool, his hands trembling. "All of it," Catherine continued, her voice relentless, "has been traced back to accounts controlled by you. Your secret accounts, the ones you used to pay for Miss Dubois' condo, her shopping sprees, her little trips, the ones you were using to build your pathetic little fantasy life, all with my money." "Catherine, I can explain," he stammered, his voice a hoarse whisper. "It was just a loan. I was going to pay it back. I made some bad investments." "You are a thief, Richard." She stated the words, hitting him with the force of a verdict. "You didn't just cheat on me. You stole from me. You stole from my employees, my partners. You tried to poison the one thing in my life that I built with my own hands." He stared at her, his eyes pleading. The charming, confident man was gone, replaced by a desperate, cornered animal. "Please, Kate, we can fix this. I'll pay it back, I swear. We don't have to tell anyone. Think of our reputation, our friends." "You are no longer in a position to be thinking of anything," came a new voice from the doorway. Both Catherine and Richard turned. A tall, impeccably dressed man stood there. It was Jonathan Wright, Catherine's lawyer, and one of the most feared litigators in the city. Jonathan Richard gasped. Richard the lawyer replied with a curt nod. He placed his own briefcase on the island next to Catherine's folder. "Catherine asked me to be here. She has, I believe, laid out the preliminary facts of the situation." He opened his briefcase and produced a sheaf of papers. "These are divorce papers, citing adultery and financial malfeasance. You will be moving out of this house tonight. You will not contact Catherine or any employee of her firm. You will be given a small allowance from a joint account to cover your immediate living expenses, an act of generosity I advised against." He then produced another set of documents. "This is a confession and a repayment agreement. You will sign over all your assets, your pension, your investment portfolio. Everything to begin repaying the $4.7 million you stole. In exchange for your full cooperation, Catherine has agreed. For now, not to press criminal charges." Richard looked from the papers to Catherine, his face a mask of utter devastation. "Criminal charges. Embezzlement of this magnitude carries a sentence of up to 15 years in federal prison," Jonathan said calmly. "I would advise you to take the deal. It's the only one you're going to get." The fight went out of Richard completely. He was trapped, outmaneuvered at every turn. He had underestimated Catherine so profoundly, it was staggering. He saw her not as a partner, but as a resource to be plundered. He never saw the brilliant strategic mind that was tracking his every move, patiently gathering the evidence she needed to utterly destroy him. With a shaking hand, Richard Vance, the golden boy of Chicago finance, picked up the pen offered by the lawyer and began to sign his life away. Catherine watched him, not with hatred or even satisfaction, but with a profound and cleansing emptiness. The gilded cage was finally open. The performance was over. 6 months later, the Chicago autumn was painting the city in hues of gold and crimson. Catherine Vance stood on a temporary steel platform 4 stories above the ground, the crisp wind whipping strands of hair from beneath her hard hat. Below her, the construction site of the new Lakeside Art Museum buzzed with the organized chaos of creation. The scent of wet concrete sawdust and the vast, fresh expanse of Lake Michigan filled the air. This was her element. Not the sterile silence of a boardroom, but here where blueprints and dreams were being hammered into reality. "The curtain wall installation is ahead of schedule," Mrs. Vance said, the site foreman, a burly man named Dave, his voice shouting to be heard over a nearby crane. "Your design for the cantilevered Western Gallery. It's a thing of beauty." The boys were scratching their heads at the plans, but now that they see it taking shape, they get it. It's going to look like it's floating on air. Catherine smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile that reached her eyes. "That's the idea, Dave. Thank you. Keep up the excellent work." As she looked out at the skeletal framework rising against the brilliant blue sky, her vision taking tangible form, she felt a profound sense of peace. This was real. This was hers. It was a legacy built of steel glass and intellect, a foundation far more stable than the one her personal life had been built upon. The ghosts of her recent past rarely visited her here. They had been exorcised by the relentless forward momentum of her work and her newfound freedom. A notification vibrated on her phone, which was tucked into her jacket pocket. She already knew what it was. On the 10th of every month, at precisely 9:00 a.m. Central Time, she received the same sterile automated email from the recovery account Jonathan Wright had set up. Subject: Vance Repayment Fund, monthly installment received. It was a quiet digital confirmation of her victory. She never opened it anymore. The first month she had looked at the paltry sum, a tiny fraction of what he had stolen, and felt a flicker of grim satisfaction. Now it was just background noise, a reminder of a man who had shrunk into complete irrelevance. The last she'd heard of Richard came via the city's notoriously efficient gossip mill. Stripped of his assets and career, he had sold the last of his designer watches to afford a U-Haul, and had driven to a dreary suburb in Ohio to move into his sister's basement. His final communication to Catherine had been a long, rambling email sent from a generic Gmail account, filled with self-pity blame and a pathetic last-ditch appeal to their shared history. She had read the first 2 sentences, recognized the familiar cadence of his narcissism, and deleted it without a second thought. He was a closed chapter, a poorly written one at that. Tiffany Dubois had faded even more completely. Her social media accounts were deleted. Her name vanishing from the digital world she had so desperately tried to conquer. Penny had mentioned with a distinct lack of sympathy that a friend of a friend had sworn they'd seen her working behind the cosmetics counter at a department store in a mall an hour outside the city. Her face was scrubbed of its usual heavy makeup, her designer clothes replaced by a polyester uniform. She was just another girl again, her 15 minutes of infamy having expired. Catherine felt nothing hearing the news. Not pity, not triumph, just a vast and final indifference. Later that afternoon, back in the sun-drenched offices of Vance and Sterling, the change was palpable. The oppressive tension that had subtly permeated the firm during the final year of Catherine's marriage was gone, replaced by a vibrant, collaborative energy. She had promoted 2 deserving junior architects and launched an internal innovation initiative, encouraging her team to push boundaries. She was more present, more engaged, and her passion was infectious. She spent an hour mentoring a brilliant young designer, poring over his sketches for a community library, challenging him, inspiring him. "Don't just design a building," she told him, her voice alive with energy. "Design the experience." How does the light feel at 10 a.m. in the children's reading nook? What is the sound of a footstep on this flooring? That's where the architecture lives. That evening she went home, to the Lincoln Park brownstone. For the first few weeks after Richard left, the house had felt cavernously empty, haunted by the echoes of a shared life. But Catherine, an architect to her core, had treated it like any other project she had redesigned it. Richard's heavy mahogany furniture and stuffy traditional art were gone, donated to charity. In their place were the clean lines of Scandinavian design contemporary art from local Chicago artists, and shelves filled with books on philosophy and poetry, alongside her architectural tomes. The space was now a reflection of her calm, sophisticated, and entirely her own. She poured a glass of Sauvignon Blanc, put on a record of old jazz, and settled into a comfortable chair in her living room, watching the city lights begin to glitter outside her window. The silence was no longer heavy or cold, it was peaceful. As Friday arrived, a familiar urge struck her. She wrapped up her work bid, a warm goodbye to Penny, and took the elevator down to the private garage. There it was, gleaming under the fluorescent lights, the frozen berry Porsche. For a while she'd considered selling it, worried it would remain a tainted object. But she had quickly realized that would be letting Richard and Tiffany win a small, posthumous victory. She had earned this car. She had chosen it. She would not let their sordid little drama define it. She slid into the driver's seat. There was no trace of unwelcome perfume, only the clean, comforting scent of leather. She drove out into the evening traffic, not towards home, but towards the open ribbon of Lake Shore Drive. The setting sun cast a fiery glow over the water, and the skyline began to dress itself in its evening jewels. She opened the panoramic roof, letting the cool autumn air rush in. Accelerating onto the drive, the Taycan's electric motor responded with its signature silent, breathtaking surge of power. She wasn't racing. She was flowing, becoming part of the city's electric bloodstream. She thought of the woman she had been 6 months ago, poised, patient, but carrying the heavy armor of a secret war. That woman had been playing defense, meticulously planning a counterattack. The woman she was now was no longer at war. She had won, and in doing so, had realized the fight itself was beneath her. Her victory wasn't just in Richard's downfall or Tiffany's humiliation. It was in this moment, the simple, profound joy of driving a car she loved through a city she helped build towards a future of her own design. The road ahead was open, curving along the beautiful, endless shoreline. Catherine tightened her grip on the wheel, a small, confident smile on her lips. She didn't know exactly where she was going, and for the first time in a very long time, that felt absolutely perfect. That's the incredible story of how a single, audacious act of betrayal backfired in the most spectacular way possible. Catherine's story is a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about being loud or flashy. It's about quiet intelligence, strategic patience, and knowing your own worth. While Tiffany and Richard were busy playing a shallow game of appearances, Catherine was playing chess, and she was always 3 moves ahead. She didn't just win back her car. She reclaimed her company, her power, and her life, proving that the best revenge is not just living well, but taking back absolutely everything that is rightfully yours. What did you think of Catherine's ultimate checkmate? Was it justice served cold, or did Richard and Tiffany get exactly what they deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of empowerment and sweet revenge, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength, and make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss another one of our real-life dramas. Thank you for listening.